Vitamin D is certainly one of the nutritional darlings at the moment, one that everyone's talking about and one that seems to dominate the popular press. Bearing in mind the discoveries that have happened around it in recent years, this isn't really surprising. So let's take a look at what it is, and then we can get onto ways that you can get more into your diet. So vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin that's found in very few foods, just a key few actually. The primary source of vitamin D for humans is the conversion of cholesterol into vitamin D precursors that then go through a few further steps of biochemical change according to the body's needs to become vitamin D. And this all happens when our skin is exposed to ultraviolet radiation. Now, the form of vitamin D that we get from food and what we get from the sun is incomplete, and it needs to go through several chemical processes known as hydroxylation in order to become metabolically active. The first of these steps produces something called calcidiol or 25-hydroxyvitamin D. The next step is the formation of the metabolically active version called calcitriol or 1,25-hydroxyvitamin D. Now, don't worry about those names and all of that kind of detail. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background. Now, the primary and most widely understood effect of vitamin D is in relation to calcium. Vitamin D promotes the absorption of calcium from the gut, and it also maintains serum concentrations of calcium, and that's a two-way traffic flow. It keeps serum calcium levels at an even level. It's also needed for normal bone growth and remodeling by osteoblasts and osteoclasts. These are the cells that break down and rebuild our bone throughout the life cycle to maintain bone density and also assist in growth spurts. Now, with those cells, the osteoclasts, they're the ones that break down. The osteoblasts, they're the ones that build and remodel. So this is why low levels of vitamin D can be associated with brittle, thin bones, or in developing children, bones that are soft and can become bowed, like rickets. That double whammy of calcium absorption and utilization, coupled with regulation of osteoblast and osteoclast activity, is what leads to serious problems for skeletal health when levels are low. However, in recent years, we found that the role of vitamin D can go way above and beyond just regulating the health of the skeleton. Almost every single cell type in our body contains a vitamin D receptor. Now, this in itself should be an indicator that it has roles to play far beyond just bone density regulation. We now know that vitamin D plays a role in modulating cell growth, regulating certain aspects of our immunity, and also managing inflammation. There's been links with vitamin D and colon, prostate, and breast cancer risk reduction. This is most likely linked to that regulating of cell growth and modulating of certain aspects of cell growth. It's early days, but we're starting to see this pattern coming through. But the problem is with vitamin D is that it's a nutrient that's become commonly deficient, especially here in the UK. It's estimated that anywhere between 30% and 80% of the population have lower than adequate levels. This is of course a sliding scale, and different segments of the population will be affected in different ways. Darker skinned individuals and people who wear a lot of sunscreens are typically at greater risk of deficiency. Although that second example is a bit of a joke for us Brits. Here in the UK, the sun's a bit like a rumour most of the time. That in itself is what poses the greatest risk to those of us in the UK across the board. Insufficient exposure to ultraviolet radiation. Now, restricted diets could also pose a potential issue. The food sources of vitamin D tend to be animal foods such as full-fat dairy and oily fish, so vegans particularly have an issue. However, there are now types of mushroom freely available in the supermarket that are vitamin D enriched, and we'll get onto that a little bit later on. Another factor is of course age. With age we get a reduced 25 and 125 hydroxyvitamin D synthesis, plus there's often a reduced breadth of diet, so the type of daily dietary choices becomes more narrow, more rigid. And often, due to mobility or whatever, people tend to spend less time outdoors. So these are all issues that can affect an ageing population. So now we get to the important point. What can we do to top our levels up? Well, there are a few key foods, a few key things that we can focus on. The first one is oily fish. Now, shock horror, me recommending oily fish. You've not heard that before. But this time, it's got nothing to do with omega-3 fatty acids. This time, it's because oily fish, such as salmon, mackerel, herrings, are all very rich sources of vitamin D. One single wild salmon fillet can deliver up to 2/3 of our daily requirement. Now, vitamin D is a fat-soluble nutrient, remember, so it will be found in these fattier cuts of fish. The next big one, and probably the second single biggest source for most people, is full-fat dairy products. The problem is, for decades, we've been sold the idea that the low-fat diet was the key to immunity from heart disease and was the quick road to longevity. How that one backfired. The low-fat model meant that we were encouraged to abandon full-fat dairy products for skimmed and fat-free versions. These are some of the richest sources of vitamin D. The fat-soluble nutrient is found in the fatty portion of the product. Take away the fat, you take away the vitamin D, alongside the other big fat-soluble nutrient, the big fat-soluble vitamin, vitamin A. Next on the list, definitely eggs, in particular the yolks. Eggs are another rich vitamin D source. Strangely, in the midst of all this low-fat fuss, people were also told to avoid the yolks of eggs. We were led to believe that it was a bathing pool of cholesterol that would stop our heart flat if we dipped in so much as one single soldier. Thankfully, we've moved away past this a little bit, but some people still habitually avoid the yolks of the eggs. And if you've ever had an egg white omelette, you'll know how absolutely dull it can be. So listen to me. Eat the yolks. Eat the yolks. The yolks are where the highest concentration of the fat is, and along with it, where all the vitamin D is found. Now, this is an interesting one, and one that I alluded to earlier. Fortified mushrooms. Now, all of the foods that have been listed before have been animal-based foods. Now, this obviously prevents a big problem to all the vegans in the house. But now there's an ingenious product on the market, which I couldn't quite believe when I saw it a couple of years ago. But fortified mushrooms. Yep, mushrooms. There are varieties of mushrooms, most commonly chestnut mushrooms at the minute, that have actually been exposed during their growth cycle to artificial ultraviolet radiation. It's like the mushrooms have been given a sunbed. I kid you not. It's like they've put the mushrooms under a sunbed. It's amazing. And like humans, mushrooms can synthesize vitamin D upon exposure to UV. So by bathing the growing fungus in this radiation, they produce significant levels of vitamin D naturally. This is absolute genius. Now, the final thing, and probably the most obvious, but you know my stance by now, focus on the food first. Get the food right, get the diet right, and then once you've been kind of tackling that side, you can bring the supplements in. So we've got to talk supplements. I do believe vitamin D is one of those supplements that pretty much everyone in the UK should consider taking. I know that sounds like a big statement or a big claim, but with the huge diversity of actions that vitamin D has and the vital roles that it plays in the body, coupled with the levels of inadequate intake, scaling right through to outright deficiency, taking this single supplement could have a profound impact on a lot of people's health. The problem is, what kind of supplement and how much? Now, there's literally thousands and thousands of supplements on the market, with some going up to some insanely high doses. And I think you need to be careful with that, because there is potential for vitamin D to be toxic in high levels. Because it's a fat-soluble nutrient, it can begin to accumulate within fatty tissues. So you can actually get toxicity issues if you get up to high enough doses. And with some of these really high dose ones, I think that is really quite a realistic risk. So to give you an idea, NHS UK state that around 10 micrograms per day is the blanket recommendation for most people. Now, when you look at the supplements, you may see that some supplements will actually give you the dosage in micrograms, whereas others will use another strange unit called IU, otherwise known as international units. To give you an idea, that 10 micrograms recommended by NHS UK is equal to 400 international units. So if you look at anywhere between 400 and 800 international units per day, that should be ticking all the right boxes for you. Now you can take that in capsule, or you can even get a sublingual spray where it's like a liquid that you spray under the tongue. But as long as you're kind of fitting it around that dosage spectrum, 400 to 800, you'll be kind of in the safe zone, really. So that's just a little snapshot into this amazing nutrient. Everyone's been talking about it. There's a lot of amazing research being done. You know, the place where I did my postgraduate degree, which was the University of Surrey, some amazing work being done there, and we're starting to find out all sorts of potential applications and roles for vitamin D. It's early days for a lot of the stuff, but it is getting quite exciting. That and probiotics have definitely been, you know, the big things that everyone's talking about. So hopefully that's illuminated a few things for you, given you a few tips. I'll see you again soon.